This is a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.
I'm Tony Bruschi. Thanks for joining us. We go now to the courtroom for segment number 1 of today's coverage in the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource police officer charged with negligence in failing to protect the children of Parkland as a gunman went through the school executing many, many students. Let's go to the courtroom.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Happ, you're ready. Okay, I'm going to go back on the record. This is State versus Scot Peterson, 1971-66 CF10A. I have Ms. Gomes, Mr. Killer, and Mr. Klinger present for the state. I have Mr. Igarsh present with Mr. Peterson, who likewise is present. We are outside the presence of the jury. It would be my intention to bring the jurors in, welcome them back, read to them 2.1, the standard introduction in its entirety, read 2.1a, note taking by jurors. They have notepads in their chairs. I'll explain all that to them. After that, I'm going to invite the state to give an opening statement. State, who's doing the opening statement?
I am, Your Honor.
Mr. Klinger. After that, Mr. Klinger, depending on the amount of time you take, and there's no time limits, I'll probably give him a restroom break. Also allow the audio-video switch to occur. Then we'll have Mr. Igarsh's opening statement. Again, depending on the amount of time, I'll give them another restroom break very quickly, and then State, you'll have a witness here ready to call?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. Any objection to proceeding in that manner, or anything else you need me to address before we get started?
We just have to address the issue that we spoke about yesterday, Your Honor, regarding sensitive evidence.
Okay, so I have the state's motion in front of me. I did read it. I read all the authorities cited therein. I also reread section 16, rights of accused and victims of the Florida Constitution. I also reread Florida Rule of Judicial Administration 2.420. I also read the cases that you attached. You told me yesterday you all might come to some sort of agreement. Has that happened?
No, we have not, sir.
It has not. Okay.
Well, we have. I mean, I'm not going to oppose the request. It's my understanding the state wants to shield from public view certain photos because my understanding is the family members of the victims would be affected adversely by it, and I'm not going to stand in the way of that.
Do you have a proposed order that I can enter into that effect?
I can get you one, sir. I want to clarify that the state then, there's certain things that we feel that we have kept out of the public eye for 5.5 years. And I want to continue that process and out of respect for the families. And we don't want anything showing up on the Twitter feed or a Facebook feed that would reflect what happens inside the building, the 1200 building. And also, we have the proposal on how the media, when they would be able to see the evidence at the end of the day.
Okay. So just come up with the appropriate language in the order, show it to the other side, and I'll be happy to sign it. You're going to let me know when that type of evidence is being introduced or offered at the trial, and then the AV personnel are going to make sure that we turn those screens off.
Yes.
So in other words, the lawyers see everything, I see everything, the jurors see everything, but no one else will see it.
Correct. Until the end of the day, the press will see it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am?
Sorry, Your Honor. Dana McElroy, if you don't mind.
Yeah, come on.
Dana McElroy, here today representing the Sun Sentinel. Just to clarify the court's order, we believe that the First Amendment obviously provides a right of access to all evidence that the jury sees. However, the accommodation that was reached in the Cruz matter that allowed the state or the parties to designate sensitive evidence and then to have the media representatives be able to view the evidence but not photograph it or in any other way, take it out of the courtroom was something that we agreed to at that point. So I just want to make sure that media representatives will be able to view the sensitive evidence that's not shown on the monitors.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. That's what you had envisioned, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you'll include the appropriate language in the order. Make sure counsel sees the order as well before I sign it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else I can do for you?
Well, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. Okay, so that takes care of that matter. State, again, any objection to proceeding how I outlined it or anything else you need me to address before we get going?
No, sir.
Defense, any objection to how I outlined we're going to proceed or anything else you need me to address before we get going?
No, Your Honor, we're ready.
Okay, so I do have one matter that I need to put on the record. Juror number 4. Juror number 4 called my office last night and left a voicemail. I have a transcription of it. As we all know, sometimes the phones don't get everything correctly. I'll give you the gist of it. I'm going to file what I printed this morning with Ms. Wilcox, but he identifies himself as juror number 4, and he basically says as follows: I was talking to my team to let them know that I was going to be out for a couple of weeks, and it made me realize, and I actually had never thought about it, but I have an engineer who was recently hired a few weeks ago who was an IT specialist for the Broward Sheriff's Department. Her name is Debbie Brown. She was employed there for 18 years. We never talked about him. We never talked about anything to do with Parkland case. Sorry. Anything else we did not talk about, but I did as I was talking to the team, and then I realized that I needed to call you and let you know just to make sure. I'm happy to talk tonight if you want to talk, or I will see you then in the morning. Thank you. Goodbye. And obviously I didn't have any communication with him. But I guess he was disclosing that he didn't realize that he had a relationship. I know you all had asked about that during jury selection, and I guess he hadn't brought that up. So I'm disclosing it to both sides. The state, any issue or anything you want me to address regarding juror number 4?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, any issue or anything you want me to address regarding juror number 4?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, so again, no time limits, Mr. Klinger. Are you using audio-video presentation with your opening statement?
Yes, so just the Elmo that's there on the side of the podium. That's just 2 pictures that will be displayed on the screen.
All right, but you're going to give me a heads up when we arrive at any of this sensitive material?
Oh, yes, sir, but I don't, none from the state during opening statement.
All right, have they seen what you want to put up?
Yes.
Yeah, we're all set.
Have they seen what you
We're
want
okay
to
with
put
what
up?
they're putting up, they're okay with I am.
State, you have no objection what the defense is going to put up during their opening statement?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Okay, please bring the jury back.
Jurors entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Once you're at your seat, you may be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a detailed instruction on it momentarily, but in those envelopes you'll find notepads and there's pens for you to pass out. Again, if you want to take notes, you are more than welcome to do so. If you do not want to take notes, you do not have to. That will be left up to each of you individually. And again, at the end of the trial, I will collect the notes and I will shred them. No one will read your notes. Second, ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize for the brief delay in getting started this morning. I promise you we were in here working. Please don't blame the lawyers for that. You can blame me for that. I got this building at 6:15 this morning. I promise we were in here working. But I always try to stay on schedule, so I do apologize for the brief delay. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have been selected and sworn as the jury to try the case of the state of Florida versus Scot Peterson. This is a criminal case. The defendant is charged with neglect of a child, 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 culpable negligence, culpable negligence, culpable negligence, and perjury when not in an official proceeding. The definition of those crimes will be explained to you later. The state's charging document, which is called an information, is not evidence and is not to be considered by you as any proof of guilt. It is the judge's responsibility to explain the law to you. It is your solemn responsibility to determine if the state proved its accusations beyond a reasonable doubt against the defendant in accordance with the law that I provide to you. Thus, the province of the jury and the province of the court are well defined, and they do not overlap. This is one of the fundamental principles of our system of justice. Before proceeding further, it will be helpful if you understand how a trial is conducted. At the beginning of the trial, the attorneys will have an opportunity, if they wish, to make an opening statement. The opening statement gives the attorneys a chance to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the trial. What the lawyers say is not evidence, and you are not to consider it as such. Following the opening statements, witnesses will be called to testify under oath. They will be examined and cross-examined by the attorneys. Documents and other exhibits may also be produced as evidence. After the evidence has been presented, the attorneys will have the opportunity to make their closing arguments. Following their closing arguments, the court will instruct you on the law applicable to the case. After your final instructions on the law, you will retire to consider your verdicts. You should not form any definite or fixed opinion on the merits of the case until you have heard all the evidence, the arguments of the lawyers, and the instructions on the law by the judge. Until that time, you should not discuss the case amongst yourselves. Your verdict must be based solely on the evidence or lack of evidence and the law. I now instruct you not to communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, about this case. No communication includes no emailing, text messaging, tweeting, blogging, or any other form of communication. You cannot do any research about this case or look up any information about this case. If you become aware of any violation of any of these rules at all, notify court personnel of the violation. During the course of the trial, the court may take recesses and you will be permitted to separate and go about your personal affairs. During these recesses, you must not discuss the case with anyone, nor permit anyone to say anything to you or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to say anything to you or in your presence about this case, tell him or her that you are on the jury trying the case and ask that person to stop. If he or she persists, leave that person at once and immediately report the matter to one of the court deputies who will notify me. All cell phones, computers, tablets, and other types of electronic devices must be turned off while you are in the courtroom. Turned off means that the phone or other electronic device is actually off and not in a silent or vibrating mode. You may use these devices during recesses, but even then, you may not use your cell phone or electronic device to find out any information about the case or communicate with anyone about the case or the people involved in the case. Do not take photographs, video recordings, or audio recordings of the proceedings or of your fellow jurors. After each recess, please double check to make sure your cell phone or electronic device is turned off. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you must not communicate with anyone outside the jury room. You cannot have in the jury room any cell phones, computers, or other electronic devices. If someone needs to contact you in an emergency, the court can receive messages and deliver them to you without delay. A contact phone number has already been provided to you. This case must be tried by you only on the evidence presented during the trial in your presence and in the presence of the defendant, the attorneys, and the judge. Jurors must not conduct any investigation of their own. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or the people and places involved in this case. This applies whether you are in the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. You must not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look at maps or pictures to see any place discussed during the trial. Jurors must not have discussions of any sort with friends or family members about the case or the people and places involved. So, do not let even the closest family members make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. In this age of electronic communication, I want to stress again that just as you must not talk about this case face to face, you must not talk about this case by using an electronic device. You must not use phones, computers, or other electronic devices to communicate. Do not send or accept messages related to this case or your jury service. Do not discuss this case or ask for advice by any means at all, including posting information on an internet website, chat room, or blog. What are the reasons for these rules? These rules are imposed because jurors must decide the case without distraction and only on the evidence presented in the courtroom. If you investigate, research, or make inquiries on your own, the trial judge has no way to make sure that the information you obtain is proper for the case. The parties likewise have no opportunity to dispute or challenge the accuracy of what you find. That is contrary to our judicial system, which assures every party the right to ask questions about and challenge the evidence being considered against it, and to present argument with respect to that evidence. Any independent investigation by a juror unfairly and improperly prevents the parties from having that opportunity our judicial system promises. Any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of these proceedings, and a mistrial could result that would require the entire trial process to start over. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and inconvenience to the parties, the court, and the taxpayers. If you violate these rules, you could face sanctions, such as paying a fine. In every criminal proceeding, a defendant has the absolute right to remain silent. At no time is the duty of the defendant to prove his innocence. From the exercise of the defendant's right to remain silent, a jury is not permitted to draw any inference of guilt, and the fact that a defendant did not take the witness stand must not influence your verdict in any manner whatsoever. The attorneys are trained in the rules of evidence and trial procedure, and it is their duty to make all objections they feel are proper. When an objection is made, you should not speculate on the reason why it is made. Likewise, when an objection is sustained or upheld by me, you must not speculate on what might have occurred had the objection not been sustained, nor what a witness might have said had he or she been permitted to answer. During the trial, it may be necessary to confer with the attorneys out of your hearing to discuss matters that require consideration by me alone. It is impossible to predict when such a conference may be required or how long it will last. When such conferences occur, they will be conducted so as to consume as little of your time as is necessary for a fair and orderly trial in this case. If you would like to take notes during the trial, you may do so. On the other hand, of course, you are not required to take notes if you do not want to. That will be left up to each of you individually. You will be provided with a notepad and a pen for use if you wish to take notes. Any notes that you take will be for your personal use. However, you should not take them with you from the courtroom. During recesses, the court deputy will take possession of your notes and will return them to you when we reconvene. After you have completed your deliberations, the court deputy will deliver your notes to me and they will be destroyed. No one will ever read your notes. If you do take notes, do not get so involved in note-taking that you become distracted from the proceedings. Your notes should be used only as an aid to your memory. Whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by the notes of other jurors. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than each juror's individual memory of the evidence. The attorneys will now have the opportunity to make an opening statement. The opening statement gives the attorneys a chance to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the trial. What the lawyers say is not evidence, and you are not to consider it as such. Pursuant to the rules of procedure, the state gets to go first. Mr. Klinger, with that being said, when you are ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. February 14th, 2018, actually started out as a rather nice day. It was Valentine's Day. And the weather, typical South Florida February weather. Sunny, partly sunny, warm temperatures. The day was going along smoothly at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is located at the north end of the county in Parkland, Florida. It's a large school, almost over 3,000 students attend that school. And it was just a normal day in February. But excitement for the kids and students because it was Valentine's Day. Years ago, there was a song about one moment in time. And one moment in time can really change everything. And on this day, at approximately 2:19 in the afternoon, Nicholas Cruz, and I'm going to only say his name once from here on, and I will refer to him as either the shooter, the active shooter, or the gunman. The shooter gets out of a Uber on Pine Island Road. There's a little path that goes into the school, and the school, it was 2:19. The school day ends at 2:40. So by that time of the day, the school monitors were going around and opening up the gates because students are going to be let out, school buses were coming in, parents were coming up to pick up kids, students who are old enough to drive would be able to drive out, to go home. So having had attended that school, he knew a little path where the gate was now open that would lead him to what is known as Building 12. It's also called the 1200. You'll hear the 1200 building. Sometimes you might hear the freshman building or Building 12. All the same thing. It's a 3-story building, built or opened at least in 2009. It contains 30 classrooms. Now, if I can get I see it, the monitor will work right. Well, put up the first drawing here. Hopefully everybody can see this diagram that's up. This is a diagram of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. You can see all the different buildings, the campus, and way up in the top, sort of the top of it, more on the right side, is Building 12. And far over on the other side is, well, just to the, what would be to my right is Pine Island Road. And there's a little path that's in and around this area right in here. And that's where the gunman is walking toward the 1200 building. It's 2:19 he gets out. At around 2:20 in the afternoon, he's going to walk into the building. And you will see as the trial progresses, the video, surveillance video, and you will see that the students, it's a kind of a normal day. 3 students walk in just before he walks in. And then he enters the building and he turns, makes a hard right and goes into the stairwell. Now, I'm going to stop that story here because there's background information that you all need to know and understand in regards to this case and to regards to this defendant before we continue on as to what happened that horrible, horrible afternoon at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. The defendant, Scot Peterson, was a deputy with the Broward Sheriff's Office for approximately 32 years. Out of those 32 years, he was a SRO, what is known as an SRO. That's a school resource officer. And school resource officers in general are assigned to certain schools, and it is their duty under contracts that are signed between the cities and the school board and a law enforcement agency. In this case, the contract is signed between the school board and BSO, because he was a deputy for BSO, and then he was assigned to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And that contractual agreement puts the defendant under a duty to the school. He's there for security purposes. He's the lead security person at that school. And he has special powers that he's allowed to do that other officers can't. He can conduct an administrative search if he wants without probable cause, but only on campus. So he has special powers that are given to him to help keep the school safe, to make sure the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in general, just to know the school itself, to know the buildings, to know the administrators, to know the teachers, and to know even some of the students. So that if anything ever goes wrong, he is the person who knows, for the most part, where everything is. He's been in the school. He knows where it is. He has been the SRO at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas since 2009. So he was 28 years as an SRO, but he became Marjorie Stoneman Douglas's SRO in 2009. So that's 9 years, approximately, before that fateful day occurred. Now, during that interim, those periods, the defendant has lots of training. He is trained on active shooter scenarios. He is trained how to handle a situation where he is the only person there, the only law enforcement person there, to handle an active shooter. He's also trained that he has another officer with him or a group of officers, how to go in and how to handle an active shooter type situation. For the most part, active shooter situation, you go toward the gunshots. You're trained to go toward those shots, to find that shooter, because every shot could be a death. In the old days, it was, form a perimeter. Not after Columbine. It changed. Usually, active shooter scenarios happen very quickly. And you've got to get in and you've got to find the shooter, or do everything you can to find him so that you can stop the killing. Now, there's other things that the defendant learns and the school administrators learn. As a matter of fact, just a month before this awful incident, they had a program for the school administrators to learn, and the teachers, about hardening their classrooms and what to do if all of a sudden you're faced with an active shooter situation. So the teachers and the administrators are learning that they need to harden their classrooms, have safe places in their classrooms, keep the doors closed and locked, cover the windows. This practical advice that would help stop an active shooter. Now, the defendant is also trained. He's trained as an SRO. He's trained on all the special things that an SRO does for a school. And he's also trained, of course, on his weapon and how to use his weapons in whatever scenario he may face. So he becomes the SRO of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in 2009. 2016, he has training on active shooter. In 2017, he has more SRO training. And finally, we come up to 2018. That training the month before was done at the school for the staff and teachers. And the defendant was there for that also. Now we go back to that First thing you need to understand is that there is surveillance throughout the school. There are surveillance cameras inside the 1200 building. There are surveillance cameras outside the 1200 building. There are surveillance cameras all over the school. They don't cover everything. There are certain sections that don't get covered. There's no cameras in the classroom. There's no cameras, obviously, in the restrooms. There's no cameras in the teachers' lounges. And sometimes there's just not a camera in certain areas or captures a certain area, and one of those areas happens to be the very front of the 1200 building, the 12 building. That's where the shooter enters. There's two doors that go right into a main hallway, and there's a third door that goes into the stairwell. The school itself, the 12th building, has two stairwells. There's an east stairwell, and then one on the far end of the building that's the west stairwell. So, again, by looking at the screen, we're talking about the 1200 building, or the building 12. At the time that the shooter enters the 1200 building, gets out of the Uber and goes into the 1200 building, the defendant and a lot of the administrators in the school's security specialist, Kevin Keldon Greenleaf, and the vice principals are all in and around the number 1 building. That's the administration building, which you can see is actually it's south of the 1200 building, because this is north, east, west, and south. And if you don't really like directions or don't like east and west, north and south, unfortunately in this trial you're going to hear a lot of that. And I'll show you why with this second photograph. This shows the interior of Building 12. And it's important because the shooter takes a certain route. He goes from east to west on the first floor, west to east on the second floor, and then on the third floor, east to west. So in looking at that diagram, all of this is on the east side, see, and all of the other side is the west side. So the way it's oriented, it's east and west, but the classrooms themselves are north and south. For example, classrooms on the first floor, 1256 or 1255, face north. Classrooms 1254 or third floor, 1254 or 1257 face south. And that's the same for all the floors. The first floor is down at the bottom, and you can see it's 1217 and 1218 are the furthest classrooms to the east, and 1202 is the furthest classroom to the west. And the floors are basically the same. There's bathrooms on each floor, and some of the floors have teachers' lounges or offices. So it's important to have that orientation of the inside of the building, and it's going to be important to have the orientation of the outside of the building. The shooter enters the school with a gun bag and ammunition, quite a bit of it. He immediately goes into that east stairwell. He makes that hard right, because just before him you're going to see 3 students walking in. Ashley Bias, she's going to walk down to the farther end, the west end of the hall, and you're also going to see Martin Duque and Luke Hoyer walking in just before he walks in. Martin and Luke will go down the hallway slightly, and they will stop in front of classroom. You can see on the bottom on the first floor, in front of classroom 1215. And sitting in front of classroom 1215, working on her computer, she had asked special permission, is Gina Montalto. So the 3 of them, Luke, Gina, and Martin, are in front, or they're in that little alcove. You can see there's There's the 1215 classroom and the 1214 classroom, and they have, the doors are in a little alcove, and that's where they are. Now, the shooter takes out his gun, and just as he's doing that, another student happens to just walk through and into the stairwell by accident. And he quickly leaves. He sees the gun, he sees the shooter, and the shooter says, something bad's about to happen, get out. He gets out. And then the shooter exits that stairwell, the bottom, goes out, takes his weapon, and fires it down the first floor corridor. So he's at the far east end, and he begins firing. This is around 2:21-ish, 2:21, 33 seconds that he begins firing. And you're going to be also hearing, not just north, south, east, and west, you're going to be hearing a lot of times, because the timing is important as to where everybody is. So we know at that time he's on the first floor of that building shooting. Where is everybody else? Most everybody else is over, if you're talking about the defendant or the administrators, they are over near the administration building 1, and the other picture that I had up. There are some campus monitors. They're in and around the campus because, again, they were getting ready to let school out in a few minutes. So they're located at various different locations around the school. Shortly after those first shots are fired, the video from outside the number 1, the administration building, shows security specialist Greenleaf and defendant Peterson meeting outside that building. And they start to walking out. They're not rushing, but they're walking toward a cart. Everyone at the school uses golf carts. They use them to get around the campus. And they're going to get on the golf cart because information has come over the school radio that something is happening in the 1200 building. Something's not right. So they go to get a cart. It turns out they can't get the key for the cart, turn it on. And they turn around, they start walking the other way, and another cart pulls up. And in the cart is school monitor Medina. Medina had been over by the 1200 building. Now he comes over, and about the same time, the alarm system in the school goes off. Now, this is another thing we have to discuss. The school, the alarm system in the 1200 building and the 1300 building was a little newer than the rest of the school's alarm system. It was much louder. There were alarms in every room in the 1200 building, and every classroom had an alarm. Then they make a piercing noise when they go off. In the rest of the school, it would be like a siren alarm, but it would be heard throughout the school. If it goes off in one building, the whole school goes off. And it's controlled from the administration building. So as they're hopping onto the cart, the defendant gets in the seat next to Medina. Medina's driving, he's next to him, and Mr. Greenleaf gets in the back. And they take off. And Medina is driving them right to the 1200 building. So they're now on their way to the 1200 building. Meanwhile, as that process is happening, the shooter has fired, and then those initial bullets hit and kill Luke Hoyer, Gina Montalto, and Martin Duque. At least they initially certainly injure them, and then he later comes back and shoots them again. And that was the end. When he's done firing those initial shots, he turns to the building across from the 1215 building. You can see 1216 is across the hall. And he fires into 1216 through the door and through the window that's embedded in the door. He fires into that classroom twice. In that classroom, the shots hit and killed Alex Shackner, Elena Petty, and Elisa Allen. Now, you're going to notice when you're watching the videos that almost immediately after the shooter begins to fire, this white stuff starts to appear everywhere. It's like dust. It just starts coming down like it was snowing almost. He has in his, what he brought to school was an AR, Smith & Wesson AR-15. Very, very powerful gun. Rifle, semi-automatic rifle. It's very powerful. And the percussion from that rifle causes dust. Remember, the building was built in 2009. The ceiling tiles have been up there now for, what, nine years or so, because it's 2018. And all the dust that had accumulated up there starts falling down. And then probably maybe some of the construction dust that was left up there. But anyway, it all comes down. And what that does, it messes a little bit with the school surveillance system. It makes it stop and start because it's based on motion. It only records when it sees motion, detects motion. So it stops twice, 2 or 3 times as he's going down the first floor. And so you just see a still photo and a still picture, and then all of a sudden he'll start moving because the dust was too heavy and it was causing trouble with the cameras. It's that same dust that then sets off the alarm. That's the fire alarm that goes off. Now, the fire alarm is very loud, as I told you. It's not on all that long, less than a minute or so, because it's controlled from an administration building. And they can go in and turn it off because it's loud. And the normal practice is to go and turn it off and have people go to see whatever set off the alarm, to go, they check it out, and then they decide whether, they need to call back to the administration to restart it because there is a fire and you've got to evacuate the school because that's the plan. If there's a fire, you evacuate. And then they can call over the school PA system into the classroom, so let them know that's what's happening. So the alarm gets shut off after just being on for a little short while. It is on, and then it is off while the shooter's on the first floor. He hasn't left the first floor. It's on and off. And it really doesn't come on for about over a minute after he begins to shoot. He continues down the hallway, and he approaches another classroom. And he shoots into that classroom, which is actually the classroom that was next door to where Martin and Luke and Gina were outside of 1215. He shoots into 1214. And there he kills Nicholas Gurek and Helena Ramsey. He continues down the hallway, and he shoots again further down the hallway into 1213, and he kills Carmen Chantrell. It is at that point, when he is down the first floor, he's made it down, as you can see where 1213 is, he's made his way down the floor, first floor. It is about that time that the security cameras pick up that golf cart. You can see in the distance that golf cart, all of a sudden it appears in the screen, it crosses the screen, and then it disappears. Because it's now going to stop on the southeast corner of the 1200 building. I'll put the other map up for just a second here. The cart comes racing between the 7 and 8 building, and it goes to the southeast corner of the 12 building while the shooter is still on the first floor. He is now down toward the end of that hallway. Now, just prior to that, in the car arriving, a school monitor, Chris Hickson, runs into the 1200 building from the east end. He's running into the building, from the west end. He runs into the building it's in between 13 and 12, and he runs at the west end of the 12 building. Remember, the shooter he initially fires down the hallway, and then when Chris Hickson comes in through those doors, those west doors, he fires again, and he hits Chris Hickson, the school monitor, and Hickson is hit, and he rolls off to the north side of the hallway. There's like a little indentation because there's either a bathroom or there's a closet there, and he rolls over that way to get out of the line of fire in the hallway. But he's injured. He's still alive, but he is injured. The monitor, Medina, he drops off the defendant, and he drops off Greenleaf, the security specialist, as I said, at the southeast corner of the 1200 building. Just about at the time, the shooter now has made his way all the way down the hallway, and as he gets to the end, he looks and he sees Chris Hickson. And it appears that he fires again into Chris Hickson. And then he turns. I'm going to put the other photograph back up now. He turns, because now he's at the far west end of the first floor. So he is all the way down at the far west end. And those red and black markings that you see, those are just the placement of security cameras in the school, in the 12. So now he's made his way all the way down the first floor. And he has killed Luke, Gina, Martin, Alex, Elisa, Elena, and Helena, Nicholas, Carmen, and Chris Hickson. And I'll check. He turns, he's going to go up the stairwell now. He's going to go up to the second floor. He's going to turn to his left and go into the first floor stairwell at the west end of the building. And as he does that, the timing could not have been worse. As he turns and goes into that stairwell landing on the first floor, the school monitor, another school monitor, Aaron Feiss, is rushing into the building. And Aaron Feiss opens the door to go inside, and the shooter is right there, and he shoots and kills Aaron Feiss. And Aaron Feiss does not make it inside the building. He's shot twice, he's killed, and he falls on the outside patio. The defendant and Greenleaf are at the other end of the building. They are at the far other end of the building, the outside. They are about as far away from the shooter as they could possibly be at that point. Those shots are heard. The defendant will yell shots fired into his BS. He has two radios. One's the school radio, one's the BSO dispatch. He will yell shots fired. At the same time, you'll see video of students who were evacuating the 700 building. And now this is where things get a little interesting but a little complicated in the sense that you had a fire alarm go off and then it gets shut off. And there was no reporting back of what the fire was, so nothing came over the school, the PA system. So the kids in the 700 building start to evacuate. They're doing what they're supposed to do when there's a fire. So they start coming out. That building faces the 1200 building. And that building does not have an inside. The corridors, or the classrooms all face the inside. So this is the 700 building. And those students are coming out because they're following their fire evacuation plan when they hear the shots. And you can tell, they're all kind of just walking out because they think it's a fire, and then or a drill, most likely, and then all of a sudden they hear something and they just go scattering back to the 700 building. Shooter continues up and down the second floor. Now, the kids in the 700 building were evacuating to a fire break. The students and teachers on the second floor of the 1200 building have heard the gunshots. They had the training the month before about what to do when you have an active shooter, and they have all gone into their classrooms. They've gone into the safest portions of those classrooms, the hardened areas, those areas where if you shoot through the door, you don't open it, but you shoot through it because it should be locked, you wouldn't be able to hit anyone because they would all be in a hardened corner. And when the shooter gets up to the second floor, it's empty. There's nobody in the hallway. Totally empty. And he begins to make his way down the second floor. Now he's going, again, from west to east. He's done the whole first floor, and he's going the other direction on the second floor from west to east. And as he goes down that floor, he shoots into classroom 1231. There's nobody to hit, but he shoots three rounds into that classroom. And then he'll continue further down. That classroom, 31, faces the north side of the corridor. And then he shoots into 1234, which faces the south side of that corridor. Nobody in that either. Now we have to go back outside. What's happening outside, right? For approximately 27 seconds, you do not see Kelvin Greenleaf or the defendant, Peterson. You don't see them because there's no camera in front of the 1200 building. They are standing where they were dropped off. You do see the cart that brought them there, with Medina driving it, it goes off. You see that go off into the distance to the east. But they are left there. And they stand there for approximately 27 seconds or so. And then they move. And they move, and I know this is getting a little back and forth, but we have to, it's a little hard to know, but they move from the southeast corner of the 1200 building to right here between the 700 and the 800 building. There's an alcove. That is the alcove that the cart had run through, and it was coming up from building 1 to building 12. So there's an alcove there, and that's where they move. They go from the 1200 building to the alcove. The defendant will never leave that alcove while the shooter is in the building, and actually doesn't leave it until almost 40, give or take, 40 minutes, or a little bit longer, when everything is finished. The whole time he's there is about 48 minutes or so. And that is from when he first arrives, which is where the shooter at that point is on the second floor, until it's all over. By 3:11, they were already evacuating kids out of the building. Kelvin Greenleaf is over there with him. That's he's not a police officer, he's just a security specialist. He doesn't have a weapon. The third floor. You will hear video. You will see a video from the third floor. You will be able to hear what they heard coming from the first floor when the gunshots are being fired down on 1 before the alarm goes off. And everyone is sort of, you'll see, they're all sort of looking around like, what was that? What was that? And somebody says, they give different explanations for what the noise was that they were hearing. Then the alarm goes off. And when the alarm goes off, they decide to start to evacuate because the fire alarm is going off, so they'll evacuate. Now, some kids initially go to the east stairwell, but both of the kids go to the west stairwell. And it's organized because they just think it's a fire drill because now that the alarm is on, they're going to walk out. It turns out that as the kids on the west end of the third floor of that building, they're all trying to go down the stairs, so that would be here. Now, remember, we're talking about the 1200 building. The defendant is over here with Kelvin Greenleaf, and we're talking now about the third floor of the 1200 or the 12 building, and that is this floor here on the top, west end and east end. On the east end, the kids sort of back up a little bit out of this, they're taking their time, they're getting down the stairwell, it's starting to back up. And one of the students, Armand, gets pushed toward the window. And he looks down and he can see Greenleaf and he can see Scot Peterson where they were first dropped off at the southeast corner of the 1200 building. And he sees that Deputy Peterson has his gun out. So he knows something's not right. Well, they're there getting ready to evacuate when the shooter now is on the second floor and he shoots into those two classrooms, right? They hear those bullets and you see them all turn around and fly back up to the third floor. And they're all going back to their classrooms. There are students at the very first students in front of the whole crowd who are going down that east stairwell do not turn around. They continue down. They continue down to the first floor. One of them goes and starts to look. They come down that exactly where the shooter had started, right? They come down that stairwell on the east side. One of them goes and looks down the first floor corridors, and then the corridor and other ones follow. And all of a sudden, you will see from the camera on the first floor and then from the stairwell, they have seen carnage. They have seen what happened on that floor, and they go flying out the doors, the first floor east doors, the same doors shooter came into just a few minutes before. When that happens, right? Remember, those shots went off on the second floor. The defendant and Greenleaf have now moved to that position over the 700 building, that alcove. And they have a perfect view of the 1200 building, the east side, and its whole south side. Because they can, from this spot, they are able to see, from that spot there, they can see the 1200 building, east end, and the south side, all the way down to the west part of the 13 building. Those 5 students are flying out of the 1200 building on the east side. Nobody stops them. Nobody asks them what's going on. You see security specialist Greenleaf, he's to the south, which would be if the defendant is here, he's just sort of right behind him. And the camera picks up Greenleaf. That camera picks up Greenleaf. There's another camera that's looking down the side of this building, all the way down here. That picks up defendant Peterson at points when he's coming in and out of that alcove. He stays in the same spot, but he moves a little bit back and forth, and sometimes you can see him, and sometimes you can barely see him. But Greenleaf is right behind him, and you see Greenleaf like going, to the kids, move, or just gesturing at them. Nobody talks to them. Nobody finds out why are they fleeing out of the building. And there's no cameras on that east end of the building to show them coming out. You see them from the inside running out after they see what happened on the first floor, but you don't get to see what happened when you're outside. But nobody's talking, nothing. They're not talking. And that was a reaction because The rest of the students had heard those shots on the second floor and they'd all run back upstairs. You're also going to hear a video, see a video, because let me back up just a little bit. I have told you there's surveillance video, right? That's from the school, and there's no sound. There's no sound, and it's motion censored. That's what makes it stop. There is also body-worn camera video that comes to the police officers, BSO. They have the cameras on their vests to the front, and so it films what they're doing as they're going through their day. Then you'll be seeing body-worn camera. That does have sound. You'll also be seeing cell phone video, which of course, as you all know, has sound and picture. Back on the first floor in classroom 1213, a student is making a recording what's happening. While they're hunkered down in the room, she makes a recording on her cell phone. And the first recording picks up. You hear the gunshots and the fire alarm is going off. The second recording, the fire alarm shuts off. And you'll have an opportunity to listen to it. It's when the defendant is on the first floor, and he has, not the defendant, but the shooter's on the first floor. And he has moved down. In the first video, he's right on the first part of the floor. In the second video, he's made his way to when Aaron Weiss comes in the building. And on that video, you hear bam, bam, bam. And that's Aaron Weiss being killed. And then you hear the shots, the bam, bam, bam from the second floor. Three shots into 1231 and 3 shots into 1234. And now the shooter has finished the second floor. He gets into that stairwell, the east stairwell. He's one flight above where he entered. And he's going to climb up the stairs, and he's going to enter the third floor. The kids in the third floor who were evacuating for that fire drill don't all make it back in their classrooms. There's still people in the hallway. The video that the student in the first floor had, you'll see that was recorded, the second one, captures the sound of what happens when the shooter gets onto the third floor. He opens the door from that stairwell, he's on the east end, he turns again to the west, just like he did in the first floor, and he starts firing, and you can hear it on that cell phone video. Bam, 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 bam. At the exact same time, Deputy Peterson is 3 floors down over at the alcove. So he's just catty corner and below of where the shooter is. The shooter's up here on the third floor, and he's over here. He is on dispatch. He's talking to BSO dispatch, and in the background you hear all those shots. Those shots, as that shooter comes out of the door, the very first classroom is 1256, which that classroom faces north, 1256. This is the east end of the third floor. And teacher Scott Beagle has gotten all his kids back into the classroom, and he's attempting to get the door closed and locked when the shooter comes out of the stairwell. And he shoots and kills Scott Beagle. He doesn't make it back into the classroom, he just collapses right there at the door in the hallway. Right next door to Mr. Beagle's classroom is classroom 1255. Stacy Lapel is the teacher in that classroom. She gets all her kids in, and she manages to get herself in and close the door, but she does get hit. She survives, but she does get hit. Now, he's also been firing down the hallway, just like he did in the first floor. Those bullets are flying down the third floor hallway. Those bullets hit Meadow Pollock, they hit Carol Laughlin, they hit Joaquin Oliver, they hit Peter Wang, they hit Jamie Gutenberg, they injure Anthony Borges, they injure Marian Kavachenko, and they injure, well, I've already told you, Stacy Lapel was already injured. Meadow Pollock and Kara Laughlin end up here. They're on the south side of a locked classroom. I'm sorry, up here. South side of a locked classroom, in the little indentation, the little area where the two doors are, just like on the first floor where Gina and Luke and Martin were. But they're up on the three. They've been hit. You can't see Kara, but you do see Meadow. She's moving. And I'm sorry, and there was one more person hit, injured but not killed, was Kyle Lehman. So it was Kyle Lehman, Anthony Borges, Stacy Lapel, and Marian Kavachenko. The doors to the bathrooms on 3 and 1 are locked. They were locked because there were vaping problems going on in the school, and so only the doors to the bathrooms on 2 were open so they could control traffic in and out of the bathrooms. Joaquin Oliver and Kyle Lehman and another kid make it into that little alcove that's in front of the bathroom, which is on the north side of the hallway, or the end here, on the third floor. The shooter reloads, and when he reloads, some of the kids and the teacher are able to flee and get down and out the west end stairwell. Jamie Gutenberg was one of them, but she got hit just as she was approaching the exit door to the stairwell, and it hit her in the spine. She makes it outside the door and collapses onto the landing. She's on the west side, the west end stairwell, third floor, and she collapses on the landing. She dies. Peter Wang is also running towards that door, and he gets hit. And he falls down, and then he sort of is sitting up against the far west wall. The doors, on one side, there's doors that go out to the stairwell, the west stairwell, and then there's doors to a teacher's lounge on this other side, and he's leaning up against the wall. Anthony Borges has fallen. He's on the floor. And he can't move. He's in great pain. He survives, but he's in great pain. He can't move. Kyle Lehman has been shot badly in his ankle. And he's in there with Joaquin. Joaquin can't move. Joaquin is sitting also up against the wall. He can't move. And Kyle and the other kid, or the other person who's in there with him, they actually, when the shooting, when he reloads, they take off. And he's able to get out of the building. The shooter reloads, goes down the hallway, and as he passes Kara and Meadow, he fires again, killing both of them. He continues down. He looks to his right. Outside of the men's room, where the door is locked, is Joaquin Oliver. Joaquin puts his hand up as though to shield himself, and the bullet goes through his hand into his brain and instantly kills him. He then continues down the rest of the hallway, and he fires numerous shots into Peter Wang, killing Peter Wang. You now have 14 kids, 14 students, and 3 staff members, teachers, staff members of the school who have been shot and killed. The shooter gets to the end of the hallway and goes into the teacher's lounge. And he's at 3rd floor, west end. He goes into the teacher's lounge. The defendant, Peterson here, is still in his position in the alcove between the 7 and 800 building. The shooter goes into the lounge and he fires 5 shots into the hurricane-proof windows. Some of them face south, some of them face west. 5 shots to the south, 5 shots to the west. The bullets do not go anywhere. The windows are hurricane-proof. It breaks and shatters them, but they really don't go, and they don't hit anyone. He's done. 6 minutes, 40 seconds. He's done. He walks out of the teacher's lounge in and around, it would be about 2:27, 30 or 40 seconds. You see him, he walks directly across in front of Peter Wang and into the doors that lead down the stairwell. Jamie Gutenberg is still lying on the landing. And by just a few seconds before 2:28 in the afternoon, he exits the west end of the 12th. He goes all the way down the stairs and he goes back into the court. He doesn't go through that door where Aaron Weiss was, the door that leads just into the stairwell. He goes through the door that leads to the first floor, turns sharp left and outside. He then proceeds, he's heading west, and he's heading west and a little bit south. As he's going to go, he's fleeing toward that west side of the school. So he comes out this way. And when he comes out here, Bennett Peterson is still here, and he doesn't see him. And then the shooter runs it off, and then eventually about an hour or so later, he's captured. Then Peterson remains in this position until approximately 11 minutes after 3. Approximately 40 minutes after he had gotten to that position from when he left the 1200 building, outside the 1200 building. You will hear from several witnesses. You're going to hear from Kelvin Greenleaf, who says that when he was there with Bennett Peterson by the 1200 building and then in the corridor between 7 and 8, that those shots were coming from the inside of the 1200 building. You're also going to hear from Officer Arnold. He is way over here. It's a little hard to see. There's a baseball diamond. And he, on his part-time, when he's off work, he waters the baseball diamond to get it ready for the nighttime baseball games. When he starts to hear the commotion and the shots, he starts moving toward the 12 building, and he will come all the way over into this general area, and he also says the shots are coming from inside the 1200 building. Just a few more things I want to go over. Elliot Bonner is also a monitor, and he will be the one who also hears the shots are coming from inside the 1200 building, and he orders a code red. And this happens around 2:30, 2:24. It's well into when the shooting was going on. The code red means everybody, there's an active shooter, get into your classrooms, get into your hardened areas. You will see him as he kind of gets closer to the building, and then he pulls away. After that, now I told you the shooter left that building, was out of there by 2:28. At 2:32, Coral Springs Police Department, they enter the west end of the building. And they begin to search the building. See Hickson, he's still alive. They put him on a cart. He's carried away and shortly thereafter passes away. A few minutes later, it's a mix of Coral Springs and BSO. They will enter both sides. They will enter the east end of the building. And when they do that, when they enter from the east end of that building, Defendant Peterson is still in his position. And he remains in his position as they enter that building. And he is, remember, as I told you, the one man who would know the inside of that building the best. If you, 2 days later, in an interview with Detective Curcio is taking interviews with everybody. He's the lead detective on the Cruz case, the shooter's case. And he's just taking statements from people to find out what they did that day and what was going on so they can gather information. And the last charge that you heard the judge read you, the perjury charge, it comes from that statement, wherein the defendant doesn't, or says that he only saw so many children, and he come out of the building and didn't see any children, and also he heard only a few shots. And none of the perjury charges arise out of that out of that interview. It was a horrific day, and 17 beautiful people were lost. Another 17 were injured. The ones, in this case, the charges all stem from the third floor. They're all from either people who passed away on the third floor or who were injured on the third floor. But overall, it was a unspeakable, horrible day. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Klinger, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a quick restroom break before we go to the defense opening statement. Same admonition as always. Please do not discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else. Please no research on the case, directly or indirectly in any way, shape, or form. If you will leave the notepads in your envelopes in your chairs, they will be waiting for you when you return. And I'm going to have you step in the back for a quick break. Thank you. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated. Real quick 5-minute restroom break. We'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
That's segment number 1. There is more to come. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.